Calling someone an idiot after they've died feels wrong, but when it's caught on camera, it's hard to call these decisions anything else. From a man who tightened a thin metal wire across a ping pong table to a host who walked toward an open flame carrying a fuel canister and learned the hard way. This is Tucker, and welcome to Last Moments. It was June 14, 2017 in Columbus, Ohio. A cloudless Sunday afternoon had settled over the city, and the park was crowded with families spread across the grass while kids moved along the walking paths. Near the far end of the park, beside a low chain-link fence, a group of men had taken over the open court. One of them is Harris Voke. He was 38 and worked in a local distribution facility. What he looked forward to every Sunday was playing table tennis. He ran a small recording setup in which he posted fast rally highlights, sharp exchanges, clean finishes, the kind of points worth replaying. He treated casual Sunday games like they carried real weight. Harris always showed up ready. Those who knew him said he needed the proof as much as the win. He arrived early every session, camera positioned before anyone else showed up, angle set, frame confirmed. That habit matters here, because what he set up before the others arrived is what killed him. The park tables had fixed nets. Harris didn't trust them. He felt the tension was inconsistent, that it changed how the ball moved. So he brought wire, a thin metal line stretched tightly between the posts just above the top band of the existing net, high enough that a player lunging forward at chest level could still run directly into it. Players there that day told investigators it was already up by the time they arrived. Two of them flagged it almost immediately. The sun was coming in from the west at a sharp angle, and the wire caught the light in a way that made it disappear depending on where you stood. They said something. Harris heard it but still tightened the wire further. This is the part that got me thinking. He heard the concern from the other players, but still made a deliberate choice to leave it. The game started controlled, both players warming up, finding the pace. Harris pushed the tempo from early on. Witnesses said he drove the speed throughout, calling for harder angles and faster exchanges. He wanted the footage moving. Somewhere during the session, the players there weren't fully aligned on the exact sequence. A short return dropped just past the net line, the kind of shot that demands a full commitment. You sprint for it or you let it die. Harris sprinted. He was at full pace when the wire caught him across the throat. As he lunged forward to reach the ball, his upper body dipped low over the table while his neck stayed extended ahead of his momentum, putting his throat directly into the tensioned line. Eyes on the ball, covering distance fast, no hesitation. The wire itself sat only slightly above the normal net line, but because Harris was driving forward and downward into the shot, his neck met it at full force. At that speed, there was no time to react. His momentum continued forward. His neck did not. The force was transferred directly into his cervical spine. He went down onto the court roughly 10 feet from where the ball had landed. No brace, no sound. Witnesses said nothing came from him before impact. The players closest assumed he had tripped near the table base. Several seconds passed before anyone understood what the wire had done. Emergency services were called to the scene. Harris was transported, but was confirmed dead from catastrophic cervical spine trauma and airway damage caused by the tensioned wire striking his throat at full speed. Investigators documented everything. The wire was recovered as physical evidence and confirmed to have been placed above the standard net line at a height capable of contacting a forward-moving player across the neck or upper throat area, tensioned beyond standard net specifications. Witness accounts were consistent. The visibility concern had been raised before play began, and it had been dismissed. I keep asking myself, what if someone tried to remove it? Would all these things happen? The camera Harris had positioned courtside ran uninterrupted from the start. The footage spread from there without any deliberate upload. It was already running when it needed to be. Park management restricted improvised equipment from the courts and updated their posted guidelines. Stay with me, because what happened next wasn't built into the environment. It was built in real time. No hidden hazard, no equipment failure, no setup mistake waiting to snap. Just a person, fully aware, making one decision after another in front of a live audience, and in some ways that makes what comes next harder to watch. It was September 3rd, 2016, in a quiet apartment building in California. Inside one apartment, a ring light had been set up in the kitchen facing the counter, ready to record. Sometimes there's a kind of risk that only appears once the camera turns on, and that pressure shaped the final hour of Nancy Traul's life. But behind those lights was Nancy, a 29-year-old full-time food content creator, the kind of online job that lives and dies by viewer reactions. She had spent a couple of years building a following around what she called segments of extreme eaters. The better the numbers, the bigger the reaction, the harder she leaned forward. That night's segment was kasu marzu, a traditional fermented cheese infamous for containing live insect larvae during consumption. She had announced the stream hours earlier and bragged in the title that she would eat it fully alive. No cleaning, no prep, no removing the larvae. She even joked beforehand that taking the larvae out was for cowards because viewers wanted the real version. That was the pitch. When she went live, the cheese was plated and the camera was centered. Right from the start, she emphasized that she wouldn't touch or clean the cheese at all, keeping everything as real as possible because that's what would pull her viewers in. Her viewers cheered her endlessly, and that boosted Nancy's confidence. I've watched plenty of live content before. It's fun interacting, like you have someone there with you all the time. But beyond the hundreds of people watching you, at the end of the day, you're still the only person in the room when something goes wrong. Nancy had set an internal goal early on: finish a sizable portion as fast as possible. The faster she moved, the louder the chat became, and the louder it got, the harder she pushed. At one point, she intentionally held a forkful close to the lens so viewers could see the larvae writhing before shoving the entire bite into her mouth all at once. What happened next was fast. Large bites in close succession, talking and laughing between them, barely swallowing before starting the next sentence. She gagged once after inhaling sharply mid-laugh, but waved it off almost immediately. Reviewers later noted that several live larvae were still active in the portions she swallowed whole, and during the rapid eating she appeared to inhale while chewing. The rhythm never broke. No pause, no water, no slowing down. Then, mid-sentence, her expression changed. She jerked forward suddenly and clawed at her throat. Investigators later believed that live larvae and partially chewed fermented cheese had been aspirated deep into her airway during a sharp inhale while laughing, triggering a catastrophic blockage and violent airway reaction almost instantly. She stayed seated, trying to cough, but no air was moving properly. The camera kept rolling because the format never had cuts. For several seconds, viewers thought it was part of the stunt. The chat laughed, spammed emojis, and told her to keep going. By the time people started realizing something was genuinely wrong, she had already gone limp in the chair. The feed eventually dropped. A neighbor who had been watching the stream contacted emergency services. Responders arrived, began care on scene, and transported her to the hospital. She was pronounced dead shortly afterward. The final medical findings pointed toward fatal airway obstruction and respiratory collapse caused by aspirated fermented cheese containing live larvae. The investigation was quiet. No foul play, no equipment failure, nothing structural to examine. What investigators had was simply the recording itself. Reviewers listed the contributing factors plainly: rapid consumption, oversized bites, laughing while chewing, inhaling mid-swallow, and the deliberate decision to consume the cheese in its most dangerous possible state for shock value. No broader regulatory action followed. The thing I can't forget is how small the fix would have been, a simple choice not to escalate the stunt. But there is no turning back now. The last story was about something built wrong before anyone showed up. This one was the opposite. Nothing was rigged, nothing was hidden. Just a person making a conscious decision to push further than necessary because stopping early meant fewer people watching. It was Wednesday afternoon in rural East Texas on April 22, 2015. The weather was warm and still with a clear sky. The property Karen found sat on open land with low brush and a line of trees about 100 yards apart, far enough from neighbors. That distance also meant no one was around to come over and ask what was going on. A small camera on a tripod was already set up near the middle of the lawn, pointed at a marked spot on the grass. Standing there was Karen Drunt, 34. She worked at a retail store in town and ran a small hobby YouTube channel on the side, built around DIY projects she called homemade solutions. People who watched her described her as confident, hands-on, and stubborn about her build. She liked turning everyday materials into something she could demonstrate on camera. That afternoon, she had a project ready that she'd been talking about for weeks, and a friend who had agreed to help her film it. The project was a vest. Hand-stitched layered cotton padding, roughly 11 pounds, was built piece by piece on her workbench. To validate it before filming, she ran what she called blunt force tests, dropping heavy objects onto the vest and checking the impact. When the padding absorbed the weight without visible damage, she decided that was enough. She told friends the vest could stop low-caliber handgun rounds. Her friends argued with her. They told her bullets and dropped weights were not the same kind. She had a response ready for every concern, and she was already committed to continuing the demonstration. Anyone who has ever watched a stubborn family member work on a project knows this feeling. There's a point where the project becomes the driving force, and feedback stops feeling like a concern and starts feeling like an attack. The day of the test, she set the camera at chest height. A fixed shot, no operator behind it. The shooter, the friend who had agreed to help in exchange for money, stood roughly 15 feet away with a handgun. She stepped onto the marked spot, faced the camera, and tapped the front of the vest a few times to show the layering. She gave the signal. The friend fired one round. The bullet passed through the cotton with effectively no resistance. Soft, fibrous material does not dissipate projectile energy the way rigid plates do. Investigators would later note this is a basic principle of ballistic protection, and the vest had never been built around it. The impact knocked her backward. She went down where she stood. The friend dropped the firearm and ran to her. There was no movement, no response. The camera kept recording until the memory filled. The property was about 12 minutes from the nearest paramedic unit. The call went in immediately, but the wound was central and the bleeding internal. By the time responders arrived, there was nothing to do at the scene. She was pronounced on site. Cause of death: penetrating chest trauma from a single handgun round. Investigators recovered the vest, the camera, the firearm, and the spent casing. The vest was examined and entered into the report as providing no ballistic protection of any kind. The case was classified as accidental, a self-directed test built on a faulty assumption. No charges were filed against the friend, who had been operating under her direction. There are so many what-ifs running through my mind right now, but above all of them is one hard truth. Karen made a reckless, idiotic decision that led directly to her own death. Karen's story ended with a friend agreeing to help her in exchange for money. The next one I want to take you through ends with a snake that gave every warning it could, and a woman who decided one more frame was worth ignoring all of them. It was a hot Saturday morning in southern Arizona on August 11th, 2018. The desert heat was already rising by mid-morning as hikers moved along a rocky trail lined with loose gravel, scrub, and almost no shade. Wildlife encounters were common there, and locals knew the trail was only forgiving if people respected the animals that lived around it. Dixie Plink was 26, a full-time social media personality with a following built around close-up wildlife content. Her style was straightforward: get closer than other people would, hold the shot, walk away with something nobody else had. The clips that performed best were the ones where viewers couldn't quite believe what they were seeing. Over time, that pressure shaped what she was willing to do on camera. People who knew her said she had become more comfortable with risk, not less, the longer she did this. She was hiking with one companion that morning, who later gave investigators the only first-hand account of what happened. About 30 minutes in, they rounded a slight bend and spotted a snake, coiled, alert, sitting just off the trail near a flat outcrop. It was actively rattling. Dixie pulled out her phone. The first approach was cautious. She crouched a safe distance back, framed the shot, smiled at the camera. Her companion told her that was enough. She didn't argue. She just stepped closer for the next take. The snake stayed coiled, head higher now, rattle louder. She backed off, then returned again, a little tighter this time. Then again. Each cycle put her closer than the last. The snake never moved from its spot. It didn't have to. She was the one closing the distance. Her companion later told investigators the rattling never paused. It kept going the entire time, steady and unmistakable the whole way through. I admire her courage to come face to face with the snake, to be honest. If I were in her position, I'd probably run as fast as I could. Reading through the comments in the previous video, it's clear I'm not the only one who gets goosebumps every time they encounter a snake. By the final approach, she had announced she was going for a close-up to end the clip. She knelt, leaned in, brought her face within striking range. The strike happened in a fraction of a second. The bite landed near the cheek and lower jaw. She fell back onto the gravel. The phone kept recording. Within minutes, the swelling started. Fast, visible, spreading from the bite site. Her speech began to slur. Facial envenomation carries an elevated risk because of proximity to the airway, and the venom was already moving systemically. Her companion called for help immediately. The trailhead was about 1.4 miles back. The signal was weak, and the nearest helicopter response had to come from a regional facility, a meaningful distance away. None of those things was going to move faster than the venom. She lost coordination on the trail. Her companion stayed with her, trying to keep her upright, then trying to keep her conscious. then just trying to keep track of how much time had passed since the bite. She went down before responders reached her. By the time access was made and transport began, the window for definitive antivenom care had narrowed too far. She was pronounced after arrival. Cause of death: severe envenomation with respiratory and circulatory complications. Investigators reviewed her own footage, which captured the warnings, the repeated approaches, and the final lean-in. Toxicology and bite site analysis were consistent with a defensive strike from a coiled position. No provocation from the snake, no stalking behavior, no anomaly in animal conduct. Park staff reissued posted reminders on minimum distance from venomous wildlife. The phone was logged into the incident file, and the footage itself became the clearest evidence in the report. I guess I can't blame anyone here. Even the snake did exactly what rattlesnakes do: held its ground, gave the warning, defended itself. The only behavior that wasn't natural was Dixie did. The desert gave Dixie every signal it could. What comes next didn't need a wild animal or a remote trail to go wrong. Just a college dorm room, a freezer left open, and a small group of friends who all agreed the stunt was a bad idea before anyone actually stopped it. It was January 9th, 2017, deep into a Minnesota winter. The dorm was quiet that night, most students gone for their much-awaited long weekend, so the building is emptier than usual. In one of the shared common rooms on the residence floor, 3 friends were filming for a small group chat that had been trading freeze challenges all week. One of them is Gally Grix, was 21, a third-year student working a part-time job on campus to help cover expenses. The setup was simple. You have to open the dorm freezer, press your tongue to the interior surface, and see who could hold it longest. The floor in that common room was the standard polished tile you find in most college residence buildings: smooth, hard, easy to slip on if you weren't paying attention. By the time the cameras were rolling, 2 of his friends had already taken short turns, quick presses, clean pulls, both well under the time he had decided he was going to beat. They told him to keep his attempt short and to separate slowly when he was done. Tongue tissue freezes to cold metal fast, and the way you peel away matters. He acknowledged the advice. He had a different plan in mind. What often gets overlooked in moments like this is how powerful peer pressure can be, especially when it doesn't look like pressure at all. And of course, we can never forget the urge to get what you want. To beat your friends is really something else. His attempt began the way the others had. He leaned in, pressed his tongue to the frozen interior, started counting. His friends counted with him. He pushed past the previous best. He pushed past it again. By the time he was clearly beyond everyone else's marks, he was committed to the dramatic finish, the quick, sudden pull-away that would land as the punchline of the clip. He yanked back hard. The tissue separated, but the motion carried real momentum, and his footing wasn't set. The polished tile under his sneakers offered almost no grip for a sudden backward shift of weight. His feet went out from under him before he could brace. He went straight back. No twist, no arms behind him, no chance to catch any of it. The back of his head hit the tile. His friends later told investigators the sound was sharp, immediate, and unmistakable. The mood in the room changed before he had stopped moving. They called emergency services within the minute. Responders reached the building quickly given the campus location, but the impact had already done its work. He was breathing but unresponsive at the scene. He was transported to a regional medical facility and placed under observation overnight. He did not recover. The cause of death was confirmed as traumatic brain injury from the impact, with the fall, not the freezer, listed as the proximate event. The investigation was straightforward. Friends gave consistent statements. 2 phones captured the entire sequence: the challenge, the pull, the slip, the fall. The residence hall issued a quiet internal notice afterward. No formal disciplinary action was taken against the friends present. The official summary listed the contributing factors plainly: an unsafe stunt, a sudden movement, and a hard surface with no margin for error. The cruelest part is that he actually got what he wanted. He won. He set the new mark. But the prize wasn't what he expected to receive. Stay with me for the next one. It's the kind of case where the person genuinely believed the physics were on their side and decided the only way to prove it was to test it on themselves in their own backyard with a camera already running. It was May 30th, 2016, in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Nevada, the kind of neighborhood where every house blends together: 2-story homes, attached garages, narrow strips of grass. In the driveway of one house, a small handheld camera sat near the garage, angled upward toward the roofline and the open sky above it. TJ Glant was 31, a warehouse worker who spent long shifts doing repetitive physical labor in a regional distribution center outside the city. What he liked was filming what he called myth tests, small experiments meant to prove or disprove things he had seen online. People who knew him described him as the kind of guy who took an idea and ran with it long before checking whether it actually held up. The tests were never elaborate. They were also never reviewed by anyone who might have caught the obvious. That morning's test was helium. He'd seen content suggesting balloons could slow a fall and decided to demonstrate it. He had collected several dozen filled balloons from a party supply store, enough for an impressive visual frame, but nowhere near enough to lift or meaningfully slow an adult body. What he never accounted for was scale. The balloons looked substantial because the cluster was large and colorful, but helium lift is measured in grams, not appearances. Dozens of balloons might lighten a backpack. They were never going to suspend a grown man stepping off a roof. A friend at the scene later told investigators they had suggested testing from a lower height first. TJ didn't want a low test. He wanted real conditions. He climbed onto the roof of the two-story house, roughly 20 feet above the driveway, with the balloons tethered to a basic chest harness he had improvised himself. No mathematics had been done, no weight calculations, no drop tests at intermediate height. The decision had already been made on the ground. Balloons usually bring joy to children. Color, laughter, something light enough to chase and hold on to. But for TJ, they tell a very different story. He stood at the edge of the roof, balloons lifted overhead. The friend below was filming from the driveway. He stepped off. The balloons barely affected the descent at all. There was no drift, no soft landing. He dropped almost straight down, the balloon cluster simply following him to the ground, and struck the concrete driveway directly. The friend later said they didn't process what they were seeing for a few seconds. The setup had looked so deliberate, the build-up so confident, that the immediate ordinary speed of the fall didn't match expectations until he had already landed. Emergency services were called from the scene. Responders arrived within minutes given the suburban location, but the injuries from a 20-foot fall onto concrete were not survivable. He was pronounced on site, cause of death, blunt force trauma from impact. Investigators recovered the balloons, the harness, the camera, and the footage. The official summary was direct: an unsafe experiment built on flawed assumptions about lift versus body mass, no preliminary testing, and a chosen height that left no margin. The case was logged as an accidental death during a self-directed stunt. There's a specific kind of sadness in this one for me. He didn't die because he was unlucky. He died because he committed publicly to an idea before he ever checked if it was true, and he couldn't find a way to back out without losing the bit. That's not bravery, that's being trapped by your own bad decisions. What comes next pulls us out of an experiment and into a holiday cookout, somewhere most people would never expect anything to go wrong. But the same impatience that put TJ on a roof put someone else next to an open flame with a fuel canister in her hand. It was July 4th, 2018, in a residential neighborhood in Central Florida. Hot, humid, the kind of late afternoon where the air sits still, and the sun never quite stops feeling direct. The patio was full, guests on folding chairs, kids running through the grass, music playing at low volume from a portable speaker. Someone was loosely filming the gathering on their phone. No particular subject, just party footage. The grill sat at the edge of the patio against a low fence, lit and active. Smoke was already rising from it. Maeve Brock was 42. She worked at a regional medical office in administrative support, the kind of job built around keeping things organized and on schedule. People who knew her described her as the type of host who treated her own gatherings like a job site, checking trays, refilling drinks, watching the clock. Hospitality was her thing, and she did not like falling behind. That was the setup that mattered because midway through the cookout, the grill began running low on fuel. A working burner under a tray of half-cooked food is exactly the kind of pressure she didn't tolerate well. She made the decision to refuel rather than shut the grill down and let it cool, a small choice that everything else hinged on. A guest nearby suggested turning it off first. She declined. The food was already on, guests were already eating, and stopping the grill mid-cycle would have meant a delay she felt she didn't have. She picked up the spare propane canister and brought it over to the active grill. This is the moment that gets me, not the explosion, the moment before, when someone tells tells her to stop and she keeps going because finishing the cookout mattered more than doing it safely. She positioned the canister close to the lit burner. The exact handling that followed is what investigators reconstructed afterward from witness accounts and the recording that happened to be running. When she opened the valve, propane vapor, heavier than air, accumulated downward and outward along the patio surface. It reached the active burner almost immediately. Vapor and ignition source met. The result was a flash fire that expanded outward from the grill in a single, fast bloom of flame. The flame front caught her upper body directly. She was the closest person to the source, standing within arm's reach of the canister. She dropped it and stepped back, but the ignition had already happened. The phone recording the party caught the flash without warning. One frame of normal cookout footage, the next frame fully engulfed in light. Guests reacted immediately. Several moved in to help, smothering flames with whatever was nearby. The fire itself subsided quickly once the vapor cloud burned through, but the damage to her skin and airway from the initial flash was already significant. Emergency services arrived within minutes. She was conscious on scene and was transported to a regional burn unit. Burn injuries of that severity progressed over hours and days, not at the moment of the fire, but in the systemic complications that follow. She remained in care for several days before her condition deteriorated beyond what could be stabilized. She did not survive. The official cause of death was listed as complications from severe thermal burns, with the proximate event being a propane vapor flash ignition during refueling near an open flame. Investigators recovered the canister, the grill, and the party footage. The summary was direct: refueling a fuel source in proximity to an active ignition source, with explicit warnings dismissed in the moments before. Local fire officials issued routine reminders on grill safety in the days that followed. No structural cause was found. What stays with me about Maeve isn't recklessness. It's the opposite. She was so committed to being a good host that she stopped seeing the grill as dangerous and started seeing it as a problem to solve. That reframing is what cost her, and it's a reminder that dangerous decisions don't always feel like risks in the moment. Sometimes they feel like responsibility, like keeping things running smoothly, right up until the point where control is gone.